Hello there, very good evening to you. This is Complete Speech, where we bring you the big picture. I'm Stephanie Lazarus. 400 city hubs gathered in Colombo recently under the banner Shape South Asia 2016. Now, this initiative, which is led by the youth across the South Asian region, came together to analyze the emergence of the region in shaping its identity and values. Now, speaking at the inauguration ceremony, Dr. Harsha De Silva, the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, had this to say.
Sri Lanka's position in the Indian Ocean region, isn't it? That's what I'm supposed to speak about. Sri Lanka is not a part of South Asia as far as I see it. We are supposedly South Asia geographically, but I don't see it as a part of South Asia. Not in a bad way, in a good way. I see Sri Lanka as a Indian Ocean country, not just a South Asian country. It just gives you a new sense of looking at things, sort of opens up your mind and not always be restricted to just 3-4 countries that we always think about and compare ourselves with. Sri Lanka has always been an Indian Ocean country. I was reading K.M. De Silva's book, The History of Sri Lanka, which is, by the way, a fascinating book for reference. The whole Sri Lankan history is in that about 800 or 900 pages. I was looking at how Sri Lanka was seen in the olden days, when even before the Anuradhapura time, I'm talking, before even the 3rd, 4th century, beginning of recorded history, or not really, didn't have recorded history at the time, but Sri Lanka, people came here to exploit natural resources. Had the pearls and the gems and ivory. They naturally got attracted, and those resources were sold. They were sold to people in Europe and other places, but it went through India always. So we really didn't have a connection with the rest of the world, rest of the globe, even though we did some trade. But by after the 5th century, history books suggest that we became an important point in the global trading map as an entrepreneur trading region. And interestingly, the reasoning was that there was so much trade in the 6th century. Said the prosperity of both ends of the maritime Silk Road, Islamic Caliphate at the western end and the Tang and Song dynasties at the eastern end. So the peace and prosperity of the two ends of the maritime Silk Road is the one that really created all that trade, and it helped increase the volumes of speed and trade via the Indian Ocean, and Sri Lanka naturally profited from that business. Later on, where what is called Mantha in the Mana district is where Sri Lanka's primary trading port was established according to the chronicles. Anuradhapura, people who know this country a bit are where the first major capital of Sri Lanka was itself a commercial center, even though it's in the middle of the northwestern or north central province. The records show that Chinese monk Fahian mentions imposing mansions in Anuradhapura belonging to resident merchants. And apparently Greek and Persian trading colonies were also present at that time. So if you go back in history, our history goes back, like most of South Asia, millennia. You begin to see how this island was always a globalized entity and was in the thick of trade during the times it prospered. During the times it didn't prosper, it was not part of the globalized world. Interestingly, the period that comes after that, which is the Polonnaruwa period, which we talk a lot about, that is in the 12th century. Sri Lanka apparently was a real trading hub, according to economists that quote the chronicles translated by others, that people from China, from Burma, from Greece, from Egypt, they all came here. They traded, they imported, they exported. You know, Sri Lanka was built on an agricultural base. It was the life of the Sri Lankan person was the soil and the water and produce. But with the sort of the slowing down of the agricultural agrarian market and what's called the hydraulic civilization, great attention was paid to trade. And this is, I'm talking much later, 13th, 14th, 15th centuries. And that is really when the focus really shifted to becoming a major player in the Indian Ocean region. I represent a place called Kotte, which is not too far away from here. The first suburb, or just an adjoining suburb going east. So in the 15th century, early 15th century, there was a local ruler called Alagakkonar. They sometimes call him Alakeshwara. So it was during the Chinese treasure voyages. Admiral Singhi came to the island of Ceylon 1411, and they came because of the strategic positioning of this country for trade and to ensure that they had, or they tried to have control, like 600 years later, not admirals, but others do come because of the strategic positioning and would like to take control. So the local ruler resisted the Chinese. No one resists now, but... And guess what happened to him? You know what happened to the Sri Lankan folks here? You know what happened to Alagakkonar? Who knows what happened to him? They caught him, they tied him up, put him in a ship and took him to China. They did. And then that gave space to another guy who then became the ruler of that region and subsequently became the king of the whole island, Parakrama Bahudur VI. Of course, that was a glorious time. All the literary works, the Saralini Sandeshya, the Kavya Sangrahaya, the Loada Sangarava, the literary greats during that period of time. So why I kind of gave you a sense of the history is because history is repeating itself. If you really look at what's happening, you know, I said this at another forum a couple of days ago, but look back in recent, when I say recent, I'm talking centuries here. In the 1700s, the share of Asia's GDP as a percentage of global GDP was almost 60%. Almost 60%. And then it declined gradually, and by the 1970s it had fallen to about 15% of global GDP. But that was the bottom, and it turned up again, and by now it is about 30%, or not 30%, it's about 20-some%, and by 2050 people, experts estimate it will be about 50% of global trade. So that is why I said history is repeating itself. And 500 years ago, people had strategic interest in this part of the world, particularly here in Colombo. And 500-600 years later, that same strategic interest is bringing people back here. And sometimes the same people. They don't come in ships, they come in planes and private jets, which is good. If, as a government, we want to exploit that, if as a government we are willing to understand that it is the opening up of this country that will help us grow, it is good.
We're more on complete speech on the other side.
In my capacity as Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of this country, I take a lot of pride in our achievements in the last 1 year plus. This country was kind of grouped with a bunch of countries that most people didn't care much about or didn't stand tall with the others. But today it has changed. Listening to Ban Ki-moon taking Sri Lanka as an example of how a nation can really seriously start a reconciliation process with all parties included, and the depth of that reconciliation has been mentioned. And Barack Obama asking the world leaders to take Sri Lanka as an example. Those are things that we like to hear. Those are things that reflect this government's purpose from the core of our beliefs that this country belongs to all races and religions, and we have to ensure that everyone is treated equally in this country. And that message resonates well with the people who think alike, people who believe in democracy, people who believe in good governance, people who believe that it is equity and opportunity for everybody that creates a great place to live. So this new country that I say is not just a South Asian country, but an Indian Ocean country, now has this great opportunity to exploit the new dynamics. And in two ways we can leverage it. One is accessibility. We are center of the Indian Ocean trade routes. It gives us immense potential to develop Sri Lanka as a regional hub. I don't need to reiterate that. Has been said over and over again. That we are at the right place. Our GPS is exactly correct. And the other is proximity. Our proximity to India and the subcontinent allows us to function as a gateway to the subcontinent. A lot of people talk only about India when they talk about the subcontinent, but actually Pakistan, Bangladesh are significant players. I mean, we are only 20 million people in this country, but I think Pakistan is about 200 some million, and Bangladesh is also close to 200 million. India is of course 1 point some billion, right? And what we are doing, what people like Saman are doing, is to integrate Sri Lanka with these neighboring countries so that we can leverage that proximity, where we can have duty-free access to India, we can have duty-free access to Pakistan. So therefore, repositioning Sri Lanka as a center of the Indian Ocean really lies at the bottom of or rather at the foundation of what we are trying to build in the next decade or two here. So in order So to sort of think about what can happen, how will this become, how it will become, what things will happen? Maritime, aviation, logistics hub. I'm sure that other people may have spoken about this before I did, or you have read about what our plans are. But we have the geostrategic advantage, right? Like I said earlier. And I did not know this, but my research people found out that of the 10 largest container ports in the world, 9 are located in Asia. And 6 of those 9 are located in China. So, what is happening in the world with the trade moving back to this part of the world? It is a game for us to lose. This is, if we don't capitalize on this dynamic, if we don't capitalize on the changes that are taking place that is in our absolute advantage, then we should be ashamed of ourselves that we failed again. But I hope this time that won't happen. But we are not the only player. If you look at what's happening in India, I read in the papers this morning that my good friend Yash, the High Commissioner, had said Sri Lanka does not have to worry about the Indian ports that are coming both on the eastern and western seaboards, but that India will grow so rapidly that there will be so much business that the Indian ports can't handle, but we will be necessary. Whatever Yash says, Sri Lanka has to ensure that we become competitive, that we clean up our act, that we liberalize our sectors that need to be liberalized if we are to take advantage of the strategic positioning. Opportunities can exist without being exploited. Just because we are near the sea route doesn't mean we are going to be able to take advantage of it. We have to. Then of course, we've been talking about an aviation hub, dream not realized, even though billions have gone into airports, brand new airports. Unfortunately, we also hold the dubious record of having the emptiest airport in the world, emptiest international airport in the world. If you have some time, it will be a nice drive down. You can see it with your own eyes. But those need to be changed around. Even though there is a microphone here, I'll tell it anyway. So, recently at COPE, we wanted to find out who actually did the feasibility study for the Mattal airport. Something that we all wanted to find out. And then the Ministry of Aviation had come, and I said, just by chance, to see if this person who did this feasibility study was present, I asked if such a person existed. And a person got out. I did it. I didn't know how to react. I was nice to him. But I asked him, how much did the consultancy cost? How much did the feasibility study cost before you agreed to put $260 million in this project? He said, 1 million. 1 million? So, that's all? $1 million is what you put? No, sir, 1 million rupees it cost. I know there are foreigners here and I'm not supposed to be saying these things, but the point is, we have to be clear about what we want to do. Yes, we have a vision, but in implementing that, in achieving that, we have to use our brains. So before we dump $250 million in some airport, we must ensure that that is the right place where we want to put the airport and so on. But having said that, now the airport is there. We have to do what we can to utilize it to the maximum possible.
Let's now head into a short commercial break.
We have an empty airport in the south doesn't mean that we have empty airports anywhere else. All our other airports are doing extremely well. and the Colombo Airport, as you know, is going in for a second phase upgrade, new terminals and all of that. We will be competitive with regional airports once that is done. I'm not going to go through all what my research people gave me, but I want to talk about this other thing, commercial hub. We are putting in so much money in infrastructure, as you know. I spoke at this LBR infrastructure summit a couple of days ago. I was amazed by the presentation made by the chief marketing officer of the Colombo port city. The kind of how brave one needs to be to say, look, we are putting in first $1.5 billion, then $13 to $14 billion in creating that much of commercial and office space, and with the government that will create public space, green areas and so on. So the entire skyline is going to change, a new city is going to be built, and they said it will be 2 degrees less warmer than it is in the city just some meters away. So Fort will be 2 degrees warmer than the port city. The infrastructure itself obviously is not going to bring business. So what will make this a commercial hub? People who live and work here know that there is a lot of bureaucratic red tape in this country. I know, even though I'm critical of my own country, our neighboring countries have even greater obstacles. The bureaucracy is sometimes much worse in some of the neighboring countries. But, like I said, I don't want to compare this country just with the neighboring countries. I want to compare this country with the rest of the countries that we are competing with. Whether it is India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, all those countries plus Singapore, Vietnam, Malaysia, Myanmar, all those other guys who are doing interesting things. So we have to be able to cut through this red tape. We have to liberalize. It's a very difficult political thing to do. As a politician, I know. Everybody comes to my office on public day and says, sir, can I get a government job? When I was in the opposition, only 30 fellows came on a given day. Now I'm in the government, 300 fellows come. But I can't give any jobs. So, how is wealth created? Where are the investors? How do we attract them? How do we fill the buildings that we are going to build? And I think, interestingly, we have to start looking at out-of-the-box solutions. Now, for instance, the Dubai International Financial Center operates within a sort of a unique legal and regulatory framework. That is because they can't change all the laws in Dubai. But they can have some oasis, quote unquote, that you can attract these investors to come and operate out of. So why can't we think like that? Should the Colombo financial city, the Colombo port city, be regulated by Sri Lankan law? Should everyone who works and lives there and operates out of that new entity abide by our regulations? Can we operate it under British law? Can it have its own unique legal and regulatory environment? I mean, the kind of new thinking one needs to ensure that we can really take advantage of this opportunity has to be beyond your typical answers that you get when you talk to your officials and politicians. Finally, I want to talk about and end with this, the knowledge hub or hub for talent. We are so scared as a country to open up. There is this great big debate. Why should we enter into what's called a comprehensive economic partnership agreement with India? Now it is called Economic and Technical Cooperation Agreement, ECTA. Why? Because we fear people from India will come over here and take our jobs. That is what it is. That is why people are saying don't do it. But that's a very defeatist way of thinking. And also, just because one opens the doors for foreigners to come and work in another country doesn't mean that these people will come in the shipload. For the critics, I say, look at the agreement that India has with Singapore. 136 professions are open for Indians in Singapore. Whether they be chemical engineers or pediatricians or lawyers or accountants, they're free to go. The agreement says that. But of course there are all mutual recognition agreements and so on. But we must be a magnet for talent. Dinesh is sitting here. Dinesh is one of the people who have been for a long time and continues to be. I wish him luck to improve the human resources of this country and coming up with new ideas. So we have to bring people from wherever they may be from if we want to take advantage of the opportunities that we have. I am certain that we'll be able to convince the critics who still believe that opening and sharing of or trading in services is not the right way to go.
Well, that's a wrap of Complete Speech. I'm Stephanie Lazarus. Tune in next week as we bring you another edition of Complete Speech, where we bring you the big picture.